Okay, welcome to our homework video about painting this photograph of light and shadow on a sphere. So our goals for this lesson are to see how to develop something that's more complex value than just limited to 3, as we've been doing. So we've looked at a 7 value scale, which is white and black and a midtone, and then 2 incremental steps in between the midtone and the white and the midtone and the black. And we talked about how we could expand this to as many values as we want, because there are infinite values, but also we need to be able to simplify this in our mind at first as we approach value, because we can't hold so many values in our head. So we talked in class about simplifying this to white, midtone, and black. And so we're going to start there, just like we did in the paintings in class. And then in this lesson, we're going to actually add some of these incremental stages in order to develop the painting more fully. So we're building off of our value scale idea. I designed this piece of paper so that you could fold it in half. I want to do one-to-one correspondence in terms of size. I don't want to ask you, at least at this point in homework assignments, to paint something that's larger or smaller than the reference that I give you. So we're copying, and we're also just keeping the size consistent between the two things. So that means that I need to figure out how big this rectangle is, and then I need to center this size rectangle onto this piece of painting paper. So this rectangle is actually 8 across and 5 high. I've already measured it. And in order to figure out where we're going to put our marks here on this paper, we're gonna have to find the center, okay? So we're always gonna find this. If we wanna center something like this, we're gonna find the center of the piece of paper, and then we're gonna measure out from there. So this is 9 wide, because this is a piece of art paper, and 9 by 12 is standard. So I'm gonna mark it to 4.5, which is half of 9, and then this is 6 high, because it's half of a piece of 9 by 12 paper. So I'm gonna mark the 3, okay? And then this is my dead center. Now I've gotta measure out, just to give you an idea of what I'm doing. So I'm gonna shove this against the 4, okay? I want the center line to be on the 4, and I'm gonna measure 8 and 0. So that way I have this rectangle that's 8 across, and it's centered on this hash mark. And then I can do the same thing here. I'm gonna put 2.5 on this center mark, and I'm gonna measure 0 and 5, because my rectangle is gonna be 5. Now I have to line these up with other ones, because I don't have enough references to make a straight line on either of these sides. So I need to start off of my piece of paper again, and I'm gonna find the 3-inch mark above the halfway mark and below the halfway mark, okay? And then I'm gonna line up this, this, and this tick mark that I've made to create a straight line, okay? And then I'm gonna measure off of that further. So I know I need this to go 5 out. This width is 5 between these 2 tick marks, so I'm gonna put the 2.5 here, and I'm gonna measure 0 and 5. So then I have even tick marks up here, and then I'm gonna do it again down here. And then I have 3 tick marks to measure a straight line against. So I'm gonna put this on here. And then here. Okay. And then I've got to find another cross point here in order to measure the width. So this is 9 wide. I'm going to measure 4.5 and 4.5 again. And I'm going to make a center line, and then I'm going to put my 4 right here on that center line. So we got 4 and then 8 and 0. Okay, so now I have a rectangle that is 5 by 8 and it's centered on the page. Okay, now I want to put this down onto my paper. I'm going to erase my stray construction lines here at the corners. The rest of this is going to get covered up by acrylic paint, so I don't have to erase this. This is not the same as if we were doing a drawing. And I'm going to take my tape. I'm going to stick it to my clothes before I stick it on here. And I want to line it up along these lines, okay? The masking tape has a tendency to want to wiggle, so just control it right along here, and then whatever happens above that is fine. And what this is going to enable me to do is just paint right over onto this tape, and when I pull the tape up, it'll take the paint off cleanly, and I'll retain my border of my paper here. Okay, and then I got one more here. So just in case you don't know how to do this, I'm pushing it down right here. But then as I keep pulling my thumb down to put pressure to make it stick, I'm kind of wiggling this to make it straight against my pencil line. So you're not subject to the way the tape falls on its own. You can control it. So over here on my palette, I have black and 2 whites. We talked about putting 2 whites on just so that you have clean white, because eventually this one gets dirty. Also, you probably use more white than black just because black is so much stronger. I've also mixed a mid-tone gray here with my palette knife, and I'm going to start out in looking at this photograph of a sphere. I'm going to simplify it into the 3 values that we talked about. So I'm going to choose everything to be white, black, or mid-tone gray. The other thing that I want to suggest to you is that it is hard to look at this from the angle of this board being completely flat on the table and me sitting in a chair in a regular position, which is what I'm doing now. The reason that artists paint on easels, for example, is that to look straight on, like your eye level be perpendicular to the thing that you're painting, is actually extremely helpful. So if you have an easel, do this on an easel, even though you're not looking out at anything, and you could tape this maybe to the top of the easel or to the top of your acrylic paper, and that way you can see, you want to see both of these things at the same time. But I'm actually at a visual disadvantage to paint like this. Even if I took a block of wood or a book or something and put this a little bit upright, that would help my perspective of what I'm doing to be a lot more comfortable and accurate in general. Meanwhile, I won't be doing that because I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. So I want this to be exactly the same size as what's on here. I'm thinking about, like, where's the center mark of this, and that tells me where the ball falls. So if you want to measure this out, you can, but I'm just going to do this visually. I'm going to make a circle where the ball is. Thinking about this distance, I'm thinking about this distance. This is what I was teaching you in bark plates, like how do we measure against the edge? How do we place something in the correct position? That's all critical skill. So then I'm going to put my cast shadow in here. And these shapes are actually very simple. I want to watch, like, how far does this go out? So this distortion goes out a little bit, but the mean part of the cast shadow, kind of like this. And I can change things, and I'm not worried about erasing my pencil lines because I'm going to paint over all of this. So I've got a table that comes through here, and the corner of the table is about right there. Okay, so this is, in this photograph, critical in making these comparisons. So if this whole thing is white in the background and not this darker value, then this highlighted light portion of the sphere doesn't show up very well. If this table is not white, then this cast shadow doesn't show up very well, and this core shadow against the table doesn't show up very well. So it's very purposeful that we have kind of a dark gray and almost a white here on the table, and it creates this contrast in just the right places. Okay, so we're gonna start with black, and we're gonna decide what is going to be considered in our painting our darkest dark, and we're gonna paint that black. So I've got this kind of wedge core shadow on the sphere, and I don't want my paint to get really thick. I don't want to fight against big, thick brush strokes as I get into this painting. I just want nice fluid paint. Okay. And then I'm gonna actually make this section over here my darkest dark, because I've got to choose, is it a dark, a light, or a mid-tone? And I'm choosing this to be a dark. And I'm painting right over the masking tape because the masking tape is protecting the paper and giving me that nice border. Okay, so then I'm gonna go in with white. Okay, and I've mixed in both of my cups here, which I shouldn't have done, but now the advantage, one of the advantages of this paper that we have is that it's sort of like purplish gray, and so when I put white down here, I have a contrast between the surface of the paper and the paint itself. So I'm gonna make all this white because I have to choose, is it gonna be light, dark, or mid-tone is what I'm picking right now. I'm trying to oversimplify. Now I want a nice flowing coat on here. I want to try to cover the paper. Because my first layer of paint is actually going to help create a surface that I can then build on with subsequent layers. So there's some soaking that happens of the paint into the paper, and we're not priming this or anything. This is just like really informal. Okay, now I'm gonna look at the sphere. The table was really simple to make a decision about, and the sphere is not too bad either. So this is very light, and I've got light hitting light. So this is where I know that having 7 values is going to help me, because 3 isn't quite sufficient to show this. We've got some reflected light here. Okay, and I'm going to let this go to here. Okay. All right, I'm thinking about it. Now I'm going to go to my mid-tone gray. I can always go back into these other values if I want to. So I'm going to count this as a mid-tone. Because if I count it as a dark, I don't get this contrast between the darkest dark and the mid-tone. I'm gonna watch my edges. I can always go back and push against them with the white, for example, but in your case, you're practicing using your brush and then you just have fewer lines that are showing through. So try to do this somewhat neatly. And now my circle's cut off, so. But I'm pushing the paint against the edge in order to get a crisp line. So I know it seems like you should be dragging the paint and making a line, but you're actually pushing just a little bit to make that crisp line. That's really important to realize when you're developing the technique of making a straight line. Okay, I want to look at where else I can find a mid-tone. So I would say this is a mid-tone, going down a sphere like this. I'm gonna call this a mid-tone. You could call it a darkest dark, but we have to figure somehow. Okay, and then this distortion of the antinumbrama is what I'm going to count as a mid-tone. Okay. I'm just looking at my drawing and thinking about what I want. So understandably, we're a little frustrated with our limitation at this point because we need some of these intermediate values, and we also need to be able to feather some things in here, blend these. So I'm going to pick up my palette knife and I'm going to take what I have left of this mid-tone gray, and then I'm going to dip into my white and make it a little bit lighter. I want a pretty light gray, actually. I've got to pick an area. There's no particular area that I need to go for here. But I want to make this contrast between the table and the sphere itself, just so I can tell where the sphere ends. And again, this is not necessarily how this has to go. Okay, so I actually think that this is going to be more of like my step beyond mid-tone, like right here. And to take it further into a light, I'm going to take part of this value, I'm going to move it over here, and I'm going to mix it with white some more, just because I don't want to fight against all the black that's in here. Okay, I think I'm pretty happy with that. So this is going to be substantially lighter. I'm changing brushes, just okay. So I'm gonna put this light gray in here, and this is going to help create a contrast. So you see, even though this is kind of very graphic at this point, just to put this next to the white makes the sphere pop out. And there is some light right here that I'm going to have to go back and capture, but for right now I'm just going to get this all in here. So I'm changing this whole color, but now that I'm doing this second coat, essentially is what I'm doing, because I'm painting over something I've already painted. It's not soaking up the paint anymore. The paper's not soaking up the paint, and so this flows more easily, and I'm able to get better coverage. Okay. Once I get over here, I'm actually in a darker value, but I'm not gonna worry about that right now. I'm gonna paint some of this light over here. Okay. So now I've established something here in terms of, you know, what these values are. And I can see a lot of the paper through this white of the highlight on the sphere. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit this again. And again, I'm pushing the paint ever so slightly against this edge to get a nice crisp mark. And now that I'm putting a second coat on here, I'm having a lot easier time just getting this to flow. So you can keep that in mind when you're painting, that first coat is really gonna just soak in. Okay, so I'm gonna come back here. I'm gonna look at this value in relationship to this value. And I think if we put some of this secondary lightest light here, that would get us this movement towards the shadow. Okay, and if I want, I can go back in, get a little bit of light, and I can kind of go back and forth here and just blend this. I haven't really showed you how to blend paint, but you can experiment a little bit in this situation. So my brush here has picked up this mid-tone. So I'm just gonna go back in here and touch this up. Okay, so now I'm moving in here to this, towards the core shadow. So this is actually, well, this is a light middle tone that's moving into the core shadow. So I'm gonna pick up this third value. So I'm 2 steps away from white. I'm gonna try to put some of that in here. And I'm gonna use a light touch so that I can kind of blend visually. And the easiest way for me to make this edge at the top even is to push against it with this gray rather than all these different values lining up, trying to get the edge that way. So we're gonna kind of reverse the way we do this. Okay, and I'm looking over here and I'm seeing that this is a little bit darker if we go down here and then over here. Okay. All right, that's not too bad. And then finally, I'll go back in with my mid-tone, the one that I mixed originally. I have a little bit left. I might need to make some more. And I'm gonna make this a little bit darker. I need to make more of my mid-tone gray because I used it all. So bear with me for just a second while I do that. Now again, I don't want to add too much black because the black is a lot stronger than the white. Put a little bit more in here. And if you want to make some kind of swatch that you think might help you to get back to the colors, if you have to mix them again, you can do that. But I can also just compare here. Okay. Yeah. try to get values in here. Oh. Okay. And I want you to do this from your observation of this photograph. I'm sort of painting with you, but not for you. Okay, I need a value that is past this mid-tone. I'm going to take some black down here. And I'm going to need more weight. Okay, I'm going to count this one as being next to black. You see how dark that is? And then I'm going to mix one lighter than that. Might be too much black. I definitely need some more white. You see, oh, I still have a whole bunch of black, but my white is pretty much gone. Okay, this is too much like my mid-tone gray. So I need to put some black in here. And it just takes a little bit of time to look at what you're doing. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to use what I'm using as my dark brush. And get this in here. Okay. And then I'll go straight into my black. And go back to my darkest dark here. And it kind of winds around down here. Okay. We're being kind of basic in the way we blend these colors because I haven't really taught you how to blend colors. So I'm mostly worried about you matching the values and seeing how, as we add values, that the thing develops. Okay. And if you want to fuss with this more, you can. Okay, now my paint has started to soak into the paper and dry, and so I need to make this a little bit darker to make it as rich as the other darkest dark that I have. And even though I would say this is a mid-tone gray, I think I have an intermediate in between here. So I'm gonna put some of my darker grays in here. Okay, and then I painted this with my gray that I consider to be this value, but I'm gonna go back in with this one, which is right here. I'm gonna see if this helps me get the relationship between here. I might need to, it's not quite a mid-tone gray, but I'm limiting this to 7 values. So I'm not gonna mix an intermediate step. No. Okay. This I'm going to count as a mid-tone, but I want this back here to be the darker step for mid-tone. When I get it on here, it's actually not that dark, so let's try this one. And this ends in about this area. And I'm going to push against this like I said I was going to clean up that edge. And the table edge is fuzzy in the picture, so you can make it clean or not, I don't care. Whatever you think. Okay, so this is a pretty simple value study of light and shadow. It's not quite as dimensional as the picture, and I believe the reason for that is that we need the highlight here and then this light part underneath. Both the reflected shadow, the reflected light, and there seems to be some really bright light that's reflecting back down here. So we've got this really bright area right here. So I'm gonna take white and I'm gonna put in this little area of lightness. Yeah, and you see that? You see how that starts to look more three-dimensional? Just because I put this little bit in here. Okay, and then we've got some reflected light right here, and I'm gonna see if I can get that with my value that's next to white. So this is reflected light that's bouncing from the table back up onto the bowl. Okay, so I need a little bit of this, but I'm also gonna grab some white here. Okay. Finally, and you could use a round brush for this, but I'm gonna there's a little hint of a highlight right here in the photograph. I'm gonna try to put that in here. Okay. So if I clean up some of these edges just to make the drawing look a little more refined. See how it looks like there's kind of a point on the edge of the sphere. I'm gonna see if I can get rid of that. Just pushing the paint around a little bit. And also over here. Okay. So there's our basic light and shadow painting. And we've explored the use of values beyond the three that are just mid-tone, white and black. Okay, and I'll see you guys next time.